Okay, here we go.
You are now listening to the Black Geeks.
He can call me. I'll talk to him, and then turn it right around. I'm sitting over there tweeting with Seven Matrix about Mike Tyson's new comedy cartoon.
No, listen.
Yo, that point looks funny as hell.
That was supposed to be a joke. That was supposed to be a damn joke. What is going on? That's real. So I didn't know. I was like, I heard it was Mike Tyson mysteries. I was like, this dude is funny. Then I see a real commercial, like starting on Mondays. I'm like, wait, what? They were serious? This dude was serious with this? Wow. Whoa. I don't know what to think about this.
I'm not mad at Mike. Mike got kids to feed. He doing what he got to do.
He's right. He's absolutely right. I mean, I'm shocked and amazed that somehow Mike Tyson has a Scooby-Doo parody comic coming out, and I saw a trailer. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me! But yeah, you're right. I mean, my belly had it dead on. Mike gotta pay some bills. He's like, shoot, I gotta find some.
Mike actually released the first episode, like for the one that the studio sent him for his approval, and I watched it like on Twitter. Like, that joint is kind of funny.
And Adult Swim has just really done their number on it. They've made it. The cast that they put around the Mike Tyson character is just foolish. It's just foolish, and it's going to be crazy. You can guarantee it's going to be all kinds of craziness.
The trailer looks hilarious.
Go ahead, Geek Soul Brother.
No, I was just saying the trailer did look hilarious. I didn't catch the episode. I feel like we're on the cusp of a new black exploitation era with cartoons. I don't know.
No, hey, I would
Black Dynamite season premiere.
Exactly.
I would take it to the next level and really just kind of somewhat television in general. I mean, definitely cartoons, but I mean, you look at even Blackish to a degree. You know, I'm kind of feeling that way about Blackish as well. That
dude, I'm gonna have to totally f-bomb you right now. I don't understand how you don't like Blackish or how you can compare Blackish to a Blaxploitation. That makes no sense to me, Rob. And I love you, brother. I do. But that makes zero sense.
And understand, I understand what you're saying. Me personally, like I said, Blackish isn't that funny to me because really they're just taking like everyday stuff and then they're telling other people about it and putting a comedic spin on it. Like, you know, look like the episode with the Nod. You know, the Nod is a cultural thing, and you know other people do it. It's not an exclusive thing, but it's just like, okay, yeah, it's just the Nod, and they made it funny, they made it entertaining, but to me, you know, it's just exploiting what we already do and making money off of something that's just a cultural trait. But
how is it exploitation when we've been complaining since forever about content that we can relate to, content that portrays Black people, African Americans in a positive light, you know, content that relates to, you know, some of our cultural experiences. And this is what we've been asking for, and then when we get something like Blackish, you're calling it, to a degree, Blaxploitation. I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, it's a good show. It's a show I can watch with my family. It's a show that, as an African-American, highly educated professional, I can relate to. And it's funny.
Can I say something? Because I got to feel this going to a whole other level that I ain't thought we were going to go on this show. But I just wanted to say, look, my wife, and I don't like to get all personal sometimes, we can't watch anything together on TV except like something she want to watch on HDTV, like Love It or List It or Flip This House, something like that.
I second that motion. And my wife, they're twins. They were separated at birth.
I mean, we can't watch anything. Everything I watch, she thinks is stupid, over the top, violent, whatever. This is the only show that we were able to sit down from my youngest to my oldest as a family, watch the entire show, everybody laughing. And one of the first things we said, this is a modern Cosby show. It's It's modernized because it'll talk about risque topics, the Cosby Show in the 80s. But at the same time, it starts out with some ridiculous drama, whatever it is, and it always ends on a positive message. You know, I look at even the spanking episode where, you know, he makes the joke, I told you, you know, to spank him, not, you know, tear down his spirit. And you were just seeing that as a couple, they resolved to not spank. I mean, there's issues. The nod was, you know, it doesn't matter who he is, because it starts out with this cultural criticism that we as black people tend to have, especially if you can relate to their situation. I'm not a ad executive, or my wife's not a doctor or nothing, but we're kind of in that class of people, if you will, who grew up in the hood, who grew up in the inner city, and all these things that we thought were natural to us. We're now seeing our kids, this generation. You know, I have one of my children, he listens to heavy metal, for instance, and we were watching the episode, I think it was the first episode, where the son didn't want to play basketball, he wanted to play field hockey, and my son under his breath mumbled, "Oh my God, that's me." He was able to relate to some, he was able to relate to some of the things I was always complaining about, is why you don't like black stuff, why you don't do this. And here it was, there was a character in the show that mimics him. When the girl's always on her phone, they started yelling, "That's my daughter." "Oh, that's her. She's always on her phone." It was like the 8-year-old. He just like my 8-year-old. I mean, it was almost the show. I could relate to it on so many levels, and so we're laughing because we can relate. I don't understand, because I know all of us on this phone are similar in our environment and our backgrounds to a degree, which is why we're all friends and did this show at the first. I'm personally confused because from a black cultural standpoint, just like Potbelly said, we have black people, and then we had this conversation before, me and Potbelly, and I told him my opinion is that with black people, it's either all or nothing. You damned if you do, you damned if you don't. So we put on, you know, some of the other shows, you know, that's, you know, goofy, kind of step and fetch it a little bit. People hate on that. You get on this show, and it's trying to be positive, cover issues like masturbation and cultural stuff and husband and wife relationship. They got their father living with them. We hate on that. So it's like we're never going to get, you know, I'm just trying to figure out what's the goal for black people. What do we want in television? Because I'm confused now.
You know what? You know what, Geekonian?
There's other people on Twitter that are like, don't like this show. So I'm trying to figure out what is it that we want as black people in movies, television, comics, media in general, that we'll finally be able to say, okay, we good.
Right.
Yeah,
All right.
you know,
go ahead, Geek Brother.
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, a lot of times we're looked at in society as a homogenous group, right? That it's like black people do this, black people. But sometimes we look at ourselves as a homogenous group, and we have to understand that we're just as diverse in our opinion, you know, which we know. I mean, everybody on this podcast knows that we're diverse as a people. We have diverse opinions and so forth. But we got to remember that, I don't know, maybe the question isn't what do we want, but, you know, kind of like, what are we okay with? Not necessarily what we want, but what are we okay with and what we're not okay. And that's not an easy question, because we're not all the same. We're not, you know, we're not cut out the same mold, you know, culturally and stuff.
Geek Soul Brother, I agree with you 100% on that one. But where I kind of diverge in my support, although, you know, I supported your nomination as chairman. Let's put that out there. As African Americans, man, we have to make a decision at some point what we're going to support despite our diversity and our heterogeneity. Like, for example, if we want to, you know, get to a place where everything or most things about us are represented in the same way that dominant culture is represented as a spectrum, we have to, in some ways, put aside some of our differences to say, hey, we're going to support this so that it becomes successful and it opens the doors to bring in other projects to show other facets of our complexity. And that's one of my issues with folks who are really tearing down the show Blackish. Like, it's a solid show. We should, as a whole, get behind it and support it.
So
if it's successful, and then open up the door for more successful projects to tell other stories within the diaspora.
So let me ask you this. I just want to ask this quick question. I'm asking Potbelly. I'm asking Geekonius. I'm on y'all side, but I just want to just one quick question. Are y'all gonna roll with me to the next Tyler Perry movie?
Yeah.
Because at the same time, we got to support all the diversities of our people, right?
Yo, real talk.
I think. Go ahead.
Real talk. I'm not necessarily a fan of Tyler Perry. However, I have never torn him down publicly because I believe he represents a certain aspect of black folks. That's not what I represent, but he does. And on top of that, he does so much to support the community, both in front of the camera and behind the camera, that it is what it is. Like, I'm not necessarily a fan of what he does, but I support him, and I support his right to do it. Like, go ahead and do it.
Right. No, Potbelly, you said it all. You said even though we have a diverse mindset as a people, we need to make the decisions not to necessarily tear down something that seems to be moving things forward per se. And the problem with Blackish is that it delves into those gray areas. Exactly what the theme of the show is. What is being black? What exactly is the definition of black? Delves into those gray areas, and us, just like Geekoni said, our families and our culture are starting to get grayed because we're starting to get into that American culture. Kids are getting assimilated, and these are the questions that I think Blackish deals with. Of course.
Let me ask you this, though, brother. When you say getting assimilated, what do you mean?
I mean that there's a mainstream American culture, and white people got assimilated into it, black people got assimilated, Asian, all kinds of Spanish. There is this not quite melting pot, because that's all, that's a bunch of crap. It's not a melting pot. It's more like a stew that hasn't finished cooking yet. So you got your potatoes and exactly. But the flavors are starting. You got white kids, dealing with hip hop. You got black kids that are, being hipsters and stuff. You got Latino Americans.
What I don't like about Blackish is that the black family is sort of like the fish out of water, where in the Cosby Show they were successful and they happened to be black. I think that's the difference. I don't think the narrative of Blackish in 2014 is no different from a black middle-class family in 1985 or 87. And, there's some updated differences because the younger children are used to having an African-American president. I don't think the issues are no different now than it was 20, 30 years ago. I don't dislike Black. It's a funny sitcom. I don't look too deep into it. I think sometimes we as a black audience think every black show has to be some sort of movement-defining entity that, we all need to spin off from. But I just think at the end of the day, it's entertainment.
I agree.
That's how I feel about that.
I think where you're going to fail if you try to compare it to the Cosby's. Because
I don't think you can.
The Cosby's were. Cosby's were what the Cosby's were, and let that be. You can call it a blueprint. You could say that was awesome TV, but at the end of the day, that was them. And I always liken it to, like, I also say the Fresh Prince should be considered up there, because that was another one. Black family, successful, everything is going on, positive messages, a lot more, I don't want to say more comedy to that generation, and it was funny, and it was successful. But that was that show. And I'm thinking Blackish let it be its own show. You know what I'm saying? It's cool to be like, you can make the similarities, but to be like, well, it's not like the Cosbys. You should be more like the Cosbys. Well, that would be stupid. Now you be biting, and then I don't want to watch it. So
yeah.
Let them do them. Let them do their thing. I don't see nothing wrong with it. I mean, I hear everybody has good opinions on it. You know what I mean? And I honestly believe that's what the show is shooting for, because you got a lot going on. And indeed, I can relate, because our kids, especially cats like us who grew up kind of rough, and then we got kids that know nothing about it, not even remotely. And it's kind of a good thing, I guess, in some ways. In some ways it's not, because the way we're programmed, we're a little different. You know what I mean? Like, I can tell you right now, our kids ain't built like that. I've been at Coney's houses, and we've talked about it with our kids. I sat there and tried to explain things to my kids. Like, literally, I showed my son Juice. He thought it was a horror movie. He thought it was a damn horror movie. So, you know what I'm saying? And so I had to explain to him. When I explained to him, I was like, the reason why shows like this, The Boys in the Hood, was good, because it represented reality in some ways. And it was just like, oh, well, we ain't the only ones going through stuff. You know what I'm saying?
You know what? To your point, Bison, just to your point, yeah, there are families that are the Cosbys today. So that show is timeless. And there are also families that are Blackish, and there are also families that are Good Times, and there are also families that are Family Matters, Fresh Prince, all of them. The truth of the matter is that all of these shows represent all of us. And I think that's the thing. We, like you guys are saying, we need to stop saying, oh, that show does or doesn't represent us, or, whatever, and just realize, yeah, they exist too.
Yeah, and you make a very good point there. That's why I don't knock Tyler Perry. Like, I'm not like a fan of what he produces, but at the same time, he represents a part of our diaspora, a part of our population. I mean, and it's something for them. Blackish is something for another side. Fresh Prince was something for this, something for that. We have to get past that whole concept of it's got to be one way or no way. Like we just not going to be successful following that model. We have to be able to open up a space for all things to exist, both good and bad, both educational and entertaining. Because let's face it, I mean, everything that has to do with black folks doesn't have to be serious, and it doesn't have to have a message, and it doesn't have to be heavy. It could just be plain funny. Just enjoy the fact that it's funny and move on. Like, I don't think we've gotten to the point where, we can, laugh at ourselves in good fun yet. Like we're still very serious, like based on our experiences, based on, how we've evolved within this democratic experiment we call America. Like, we haven't necessarily really fully come to terms with who we are yet. And I think that's part of why everything is so tense for us, but we have to learn how to take a step back and really look at them.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to say, I think the comparison to the Cosbys is valid on this score. When you talk about the media and mainstream, if you will, as a whole, I think the difference between, all the other shows, the Fresh Prince or Family Matters or House of Pain, all the different shows that have come out in the year since the Cosby Show, I think the difference is that where you had other shows, even before the Cosbys, the Jeffersons, Sanford and Son, those shows weren't, at least this is my impression, were not intended to make black life, black culture, black family a mainstream thing to where you can watch that show and ignore the fact that they're black. There was no, I think that was what the Cosby Show was attempting to do, was to say, look, we're just an American family. I think the other shows were like, this is an inside joke. This is for us. And I think that's the body of what Tyler Perry does, for instance. He does shows for a certain demographic, unashamed. That's okay. I think the reason why people compare Blackish is because Blackish is trying, in my opinion, to do similar, but instead of mainstreaming black family, black culture, is basically talking about the issues of mainstreaming as a modern black family, which I think is still dealing with, mainstream and trying to make it so most people can relate, whereas I just think the other shows were just more inside jokes or just a funny show. So I think that's why people compare it. So I think it's important that we say, okay, well, what is it that Blackish is trying to achieve and how they're doing? And I think the criticism is there, and I think that's why they get so much criticism versus your, like, House of Pain or other shows that are just meant to just be straight-up comedy, Medea, all this stuff going on, because it's not being made with the intention that, this is going to be something that non-blacks are going to be able to relate to. Whereas Blackish, from what I'm understanding, from what I've been reading, it's kind of sort of mainstream. It's not on the Cosby level, because the Cosby's made no allusion to race in many cases. But this is in our face now that we do have the black president and different things going on in our culture. It is a big thing, I think. And I think.
Let me ask you this: through Geek Soul Brother and yourselves, if someone said the face of Black Geeks is still Urkel, how would you respond to that? I know I don't want to drill too deep into that. I know you got to move on, but shouldn't that have evolved somewhat? Urkel is not Black Nerds. I mean, you can go on the internet and see that, but to mainstream media, if you say Black Nerds, that's the first thing that's going to pop in your mind.
Yes, you're right. And
I would say that's because we don't have shows yet. Like
we don't have shows.
What's that one with what's the one with all them white guys, all them geeks?
The Big Bang Theory.
Big Bang Theory. We haven't mainstream Black Geeks at all. In no capacity that I've seen anyway.
That's because you guys have not signed the contract. Once you guys sign the contract,
that's because
we'll have a Black Geek show.
That is something we didn't want to talk about.
We'll have Big Bang DC.
We'll probably talk about the same crap everybody else talking about that's not black. This DC area is a mess.
Because I wanted to mention that Enda pointed out something really interesting online. Essentially because we have these conversations, and I think kind of this leads into your point, Geekonius, was that we don't talk about shows like Bernie Mac and Family Matters, because they were always set up just to be black comedy shows, but this is a good point because we're having this conversation like, wow, there really have been a few shows along the way that have delved into the black family dynamic, and I'm not completely against Blackish, so don't get me wrong. My comment was, it was okay. It was just okay. I thought that the writing was pretty creative with what they were trying to do, so don't get me wrong in my statement that. I was like, it was okay. And I didn't, laugh all the way through it, but I thought it was, for what they were trying to do, I thought they approached it pretty well. But have I sold on the show yet? No, not really. It's okay to me. But I think that's the dynamic. It's just it appeals to certain folks. And the fact that they are exploring these issues, because these are real issues that people are struggling with. And even from the beginning, from the rites of passage piece to spanking to, just understanding that, the new nerd, or whatever, how the son, actually just acknowledged another person based upon being, we're both nerds. Fine, well, we acknowledge each other there. I get what they're trying to do. They're having these great morals at the end, which is really cool. But like I say, with all the other things I'm watching, is this one, the funny for me? It's okay. It's just okay to me at this point. But I'm sorry, King Face, you haven't put.
No, what I was going to say, I was just making a quick point. It's funny that we keep saying things like this was no black show, that was no black show. I not ever considered Family Matters a black show. It never crossed my mind that was a black show. I mean, look at what it came on with. It came on with, and they did tie-ins with shows like Step by Step and whatever that other crazy joint was that came on right before it. There was nothing about Family Matters that made me say, oh, yeah, it's a black show. It was just a show. And even now, when I think about it, I still don't consider it just a black show. I don't even think they brought up too much about race up in that show, period. And if they did, I don't remember. Granted, I was younger, but I don't really think of it as such. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they did.
Which is where all shows should try to be at.
Right, and they didn't very often. You're absolutely right. It was just, and I think that was the kind of the line that Darky Coney's was drawing. The fact that it was just a show. They went out, they made a funny show. It just so happened they based it around a black family, and it was out there and it was funny. Did they bring some cultural aspects into it? Absolutely. You know, but to me, that's kind of sort of the difference here. Whereas it was just a family doing their thing and they were funny about it. You know, this show is just taking particular elements of, and granted, there are things that should be discussed, and they're highlighting them on each show. You know, so to me, it's about not necessarily the family, or it's about the issue, and then they're highlighting the issue. But with and I guess technically you could say the same thing about Family Matters. But this show was goofy. I mean, heck, you know, replicating Steve and Stefan. You know, it was funny.
But can I say?
So I think that. Can I say? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say on that point. It's interesting because I actually had an interview with an exchange student from China today that was talking about cultural tension and racism and things of that nature, prejudice. And I was telling her during the interview, I was saying that to me, it seemed like things have gotten worse in the Obama era in these last decade than they were in like the 90s when it comes to race. And maybe it's just me, but it's funny that we bring up Family Matters, which I would say would be a good template in the mold of the Cosby Show, in the sense that it was just meant to be just a family doing their thing and being funny. And it was mainstreamed. It was, network Friday night television that everybody watched it. Urkel was huge in the 90s, if we remember that. He had a doll, he had everything. Yeah. But I think that, race relations in America, I'm not saying they ever got better than they were before Obama, but I think it brought a lot of the ugly back to the surface. So
okay. So I was about to have, so that makes more sense. I was about to correct you.
So now
I don't think it got worse.
Yeah, I think it
got worse. It got real. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it got real.
I think
because before the dude, and it's still kind of that dude. Like when you think of racism, you can't really, you know it exists, but it's like a chameleon. It's just there, but you can't see it. You can't point it out, and you're looking at the dude, and you're always wondering if the dude is talking mess in his mind. But whereas when Obama got elected, those dudes that was real good with their PR, like their public relations department, their public relations department got
fell up the mass fail.
Yeah, mass fail. And you have people like, this little nigga's gonna get elected. And it's like, whoa, didn't see that coming. You see what I'm saying? And everybody expected what you're doing. Kind of just.
But is it just me? It does seem like in the last.
I mean, here's the deal, man. Like,
but it's more out there.
Coincided with an economic downturn, and it also coincided with these persisting foreign military pursuits. So you have a number of factors that are influencing the public in a negative way. Like, folks are feeling broke in ways that they haven't felt before, and there's this squeeze there. So you got this frustration. And, the majority of the population are affected in ways that they haven't been affected before. And even though it's not Obama's fault, they have to, they feel a need to, express their frustration in that way. So it's like you have this illusion that's been put forward of this post-racial society, but at the same time, as opposed to really fully analyzing and assessing why the country is in the shape that it's in, you get comments like, we want our country back. But from who? Like, it's this misdirected anger and frustration and rage that it's now bubble to the surface.
Well, that's why I'm saying it seems to me not that anything really changed. We know nothing really changed. It's just more to the surface. But when you had certain shows in the 90s and early 2000s, it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't think anybody was really saying, "Oh, is Family Matters, mainstream, or the Parenthood, is that considered mainstream?" Because none of them shows, if I remember correctly,
honestly, we was riding the economic boom. Nobody cared.
No, but there's also the issue. There's also an issue that in the last 8 years, social media has exploded. So we're actually clashing because we hear each other now. Where things were said kind of under breath or in the shadows or whatnot, and you didn't have a platform. Now everybody, racist, non-racist, black, white, whatever, has a platform to express their, either intelligent or ignorant opinion, and we're clashing on it. We're clashing on social media. I think that's where you're talking about, Geekoni, is that it's bubbling to the surface. It's always been there, but it's bubbling to surfaces because every other day we get a news article about somebody said something stupid on Twitter or Facebook or something like that,
I think another thing we have to take into mind that in the 90s, the economy was relatively stable. If you search through American history, the most volatile times in this country's history have been when the economy has gone bad. If you start from World War I on upwards, there have been just, especially who becomes the butt of all that concern? Black Americans.
Minority groups. Absolutely. Bison has basically confirmed what I was saying earlier. The 90s, we had this huge economic, boom. The Clinton years was good for everybody for the most part, at least from
and they allowed him to smoke weed, have a mistress, and everything.
No. American economic standpoint.
See, we can't let face get on here and lie. Bill Clinton did not smoke weed. He did not inhale. He did not inhale.
He just imported it. Listen. We keep it real on the show. My man was smoking weed, son. You can't not. Once you puff, whether you I kind of held my breath. No, you put it on your lips. Pass the buck. He passed that joint on. He was getting it. I can tell. He looks high right now.
It's interesting. Like you look at it. Come on, look at the numbers. White America is feeling a squeeze financially, economically, socially. They have rarely had to experience in this country. You talk about the recession. It's impacted them in ways that they haven't had to deal with, and so it's essentially become a threat to white privilege. And as opposed to acknowledging that white privilege, it's more like something is being taken from them.
Thank you, Coney. Finish his point. Go ahead, Potbelly. Finish your point. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, when you have white privilege in America is being threatened as a result of poor economics. And the result of that, as opposed to addressing that white privilege and dealing with the fact that it's there and it's been an unfair advantage, it's more like a spoiled child. It's like, well, why is this happening to me? You're taking this from me. We want our country back. We want your country back from whom? Black people, minorities didn't take your country. You look at the Tea Party, you look at the Koch brothers, you look at everything that's going on in that space. It's all about, we want the country back. But what does that really mean?
Right, and let's be honest. Let's be honest about that whole statement. In all honesty, the country is held by companies. It's held by the people who have the money. So to say that you want your country back, all of a sudden, when Obama gets in the office, you're just trying to. You say, look, we really don't want this country run by the black dude. We don't want that. I think it's because really he's not your problem. He's not your problem at all. The problem is that the people with the money are running it, and you aren't. And that's really who you want your country back from. Because really, all they're sitting there yelling and screaming, "Oh, we want our country back, we want our country back." Get it back from the people who actually have it, because he doesn't. Because guess what? Very shortly, he's going to be out of office with somebody else. And y'all still going to be making that same statement when it comes around to the next election? Because I haven't seen anybody on the ticket that looks anything like him. So you go, is that same statement going to be made? Because technically, when he leaves office, the exact same people who have your country now is going to have it again in 4 years because the Supreme Court decided that companies can now be people and that money can go to any candidate, and the candidate can then give it to any other candidate. That's incredible. You got like 40 seconds. You got 40 seconds.
I just want to say that the whole thing is an illusion. Let's be honest. When Obama came into office, the economy was crap. You know, the Dow was like 7,900. It's 17,000 now. S&P was 800. It was 19.
The even craziest part is, I thought we was going to talk about Team on Flash, and here we are. So let's kind of fall back on that just a little bit, and let's do.
Because you all are Black Geeks. The Black Geeks.
Yeah, let's drop that black thing and just go on with geeks.
You want to drop the black thing?